The heat was a physical presence, a weight that settled on the shoulders and pressed the breath from the lungs. For 6 days, it had been Alara's constant tormentor, second only to the gnawing dread that had hollowed her out from the inside. The station at Promise Creek was little more than a sun-bleached wound in the endless, dusty plains. A wooden platform, a small office with peeling paint, and 2 shimmering steel rails that vanished into the wavering horizon. It was a place meant for passage, not for permanence, yet it had become her prison. Her son, Thomas, lay limp in the sliver of shade cast by the station's overhang, his small chest rising and falling in shallow, worrying jerks. His whimpers for water had faded hours ago into a lethargic silence that terrified her more than any scream. His skin was dry, his lips cracked like the parched earth beneath them. Each time she looked at him, a sliver of her carefully constructed composure flaked away, exposing the raw panic beneath. They had arrived with a worn ticket, a single trunk, and a letter from her late husband's cousin, a man she had never met, promising work and a small plot of land. The letter was now a soft, crumpled square in her pocket, its promises as brittle as dried leaves. The train had pulled away with a mournful hiss, leaving them in a silence that was absolute, a silence that had slowly, over 6 days, begun to sound like abandonment. No one had come. No one was coming. The first day had been marked by a desperate optimism, the second by a gnawing anxiety. By the third, a quiet, cold certainty had settled in her heart. They were alone. Her meager savings, tucked into the lining of her bodice, had been spent on the ticket. The last of their bread and dried apples had been consumed on the 4th day, each bite a sacrament of their dwindling hope. Now, on the 6th day, there was nothing left but the heat and the judging eyes of the few who passed. The station master, a man as weathered and silent as the building he inhabited, had watched them from the beginning. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a face that seemed carved from unyielding stone, his eyes shadowed by the brim of a sweat-stained hat. He moved with a deliberate, unhurried economy, his presence a constant, unnerving fixture at the edge of her vision. He never spoke to her, never offered a word of inquiry or pity, for which she was grimly grateful. Pity was a currency she could not afford to accept. It would shatter the last of her pride. Yet his gaze followed her. She felt it when she paced the length of the platform, her long skirt kicking up clouds of ochre dust. She felt it when she dampened her handkerchief from their nearly empty canteen to press it against Thomas's forehead. It was not a leering or a cruel gaze, but one of sober, steady observation, and in her frayed state, it felt like an accusation. Her failure laid bare. On the evening of the 3rd day, after the sun had bled out across the sky and left the land in bruised shades of purple and gray, she had found a tin cup of water sitting on the edge of the platform near their bench. It hadn't been there before. She had looked toward the darkened window of his office, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Suspicion warred with a desperate, shameful thirst. She had not touched it, letting it sit until the morning sun stole it away, leaving only a pale ring of dust. He had not acknowledged its appearance or its disappearance. The silent offering, and her silent refusal, became a ritual. Each evening the cup appeared. Each morning it was gone, untouched. She was clinging to a foolish, dangerous pride, and she knew it. It was a luxury her son could no longer afford. The morning of the 4th day dawned with a white, merciless glare. The air was already thick and stagnant, promising a heat that would be worse than all the days that had come before. Thomas had not stirred when she'd whispered his name, his breathing so faint she had to place a trembling hand on his chest to feel its fragile movement. The sight of his pale face, small and still, finally broke her. The wall of her pride crumbled, turning to dust and scattering in the hot wind. That evening, when the tin cup appeared in its usual spot, filled to the brim with cool, clean water, she did not hesitate. She crawled from their bench, her own thirst afire in her throat, and carried the cup as if it were a holy relic. She dipped her fingers in and wet Thomas's lips first, watching a flicker of consciousness return to his eyes. He drank, his small hands clutching weakly at hers, his gulps frantic and loud in the immense quiet. Only after he had taken his fill and slipped back into a restless sleep did she allow herself to drink, the water a shocking, life-giving miracle. She drank it all, then placed the empty cup back on the edge of the platform, a silent act of capitulation and gratitude. The next morning, a small parcel wrapped in brown paper sat beside the refilled cup. Inside were 2 thick slices of dark bread and a piece of salted meat. She wept then, silent, scalding tears that tracked clean paths through the grime on her cheeks. She fed Thomas small, softened bites, and ate the rest herself, the coarse food tasting of salvation. She still had not spoken to the station master, nor he to her, but a fragile, unspoken thread now stretched between them in the suffocating air. Later that day, a new threat materialized. A stout man in a dusty black suit, Mr. Croft, the town's land agent and self-appointed custodian of its decency, strode onto the platform. His eyes, small and hard, took in her worn dress, her exhausted posture, and the sleeping form of her son. He stopped before her, blocking the meager sun. "You've been here for some days, madam," he said, his voice slick with a condescending authority. "This station is not a boarding house. Vagrancy is frowned upon in Promise Creek." Elara rose slowly, her body stiff. She willed her voice to be steady. "We are waiting for family." "So you said to the sheriff on Tuesday?" he replied, a dismissive sneer twisting his lips. "Your family seems to have forgotten you. The town council has concerns. It is not a good look, a woman and child lingering." He made the word sound like a disease. Her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "We are of no trouble to anyone." "You are a trouble to the civic order," Croft stated flatly. "You have until tomorrow's freight train to be on your way. I will arrange passage for you. There are workhouses further east that are better equipped to handle your situation." The threat was clear. Separation, destitution, a fate worse than this sun-scorched purgatory. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her exhaustion. From the corner of her eye, she saw the station master emerge from his office. He did not look at them, instead busying himself with a crate on the far side of the platform. But she knew he was listening. His movements had a coiled stillness, a tension that belied the simple nature of his task. Croft noticed him too, and his tone hardened. "Do you understand me? Tomorrow. Be ready." He turned and walked away, his heavy footsteps echoing on the wooden planks like the tolling of a bell. The air felt colder, despite the oppressive heat. The unspoken kindness of a cup of water felt impossibly small against the official cruelty of the world. The 6th day was a descent into a waking nightmare. Thomas was burning with fever, his body radiating a dry, unnatural heat. He was unresponsive, his eyes glassy and unfocused when she could coax his lids to flutter open. The water the station master left did little to quell the fire within him. Elara's mind raced, a frantic catalogue of horrors. The workhouse, being separated from her son, watching him fade away on this desolate platform under an indifferent sky. Despair was no longer a quiet dread. It was a living thing, with claws that tore at her insides. She held Thomas, rocking him gently, humming a lullaby that was more a prayer than a song, her voice cracking with unshed tears. She felt the station master's presence long before she saw him. He moved with a quietness that was unnerving in a man his size. He stopped a few feet from her bench, holding a small, damp cloth. He didn't offer it, simply held it out. His face was unreadable, but his eyes, when they met hers, held a depth of something she couldn't name. It wasn't pity. It was a shared understanding of hardship, a quiet acknowledgement of her struggle. Hesitantly, she reached out and took the cloth. It was cool against her palm. "Thank you," she whispered, the words feeling foreign and inadequate. He gave a short, sharp nod, his gaze dropping to Thomas. He lingered for a moment, his jaw tight, before retreating to the shade of his office doorway, resuming his silent watch. His vigil was a strange comfort, a solitary anchor in her swirling terror. As the afternoon sun reached its zenith, casting sharp, brutal shadows, she saw Mr. Croft returning. He was not alone this time. The town sheriff, a lanky man with a weary face and a star pinned to his vest, walked beside him. The finality of their approach stole the air from her lungs. This was it, the end of her stand. Croft's face was smug, triumphant. "It is time, madam," he announced, his voice booming with false magnanimity. "The freight is due in an hour. We'll see you and the boy settled." "He is not well," Alara pleaded, her voice trembling as she clutched Thomas tighter. "He cannot travel. He will be cared for by the proper authorities," Croft dismissed, reaching for her arm. "Now come along." No more fuss. His fingers closed around her elbow, his grip surprisingly strong, and a choked sob of pure terror escaped her lips. Before Croft could pull her to her feet, a shadow fell over them. The station master stood there, having crossed the platform in 3 silent strides. He was a wall of quiet, immovable force. He did not look at Croft. His gaze was fixed on Alara, on the hand gripping her arm. "Let her go," he said. The words were low, not a shout, but they carried a weight that made the air crackle. Croft, startled, released her. He puffed out his chest. "This is official town business, Silas. This is not your concern." "She is my concern," Silas replied, his voice still quiet, yet it cut through the oppressive heat. He took a half-step forward, placing himself between them. He looked from Croft to the sheriff, his expression flat, unyielding. "She's not leaving." The sheriff shifted his weight, his hand hovering near his pistol, suddenly uncertain. "Now, Silas, be reasonable. The council can take it up with the railroad," Silas interrupted calmly. "She's a passenger under my protection. She's with me." The words hung in the shimmering air, simple, declarative, and absolute. "With me." Alara stared at him, her heart pounding. It was the most she had heard him speak in 6 days. Croft's face flushed with anger, but he saw the look in Silas's eyes. A look that promised no violence, but an absolute refusal to yield that was more intimidating than any overt threat. He sputtered for a moment, then turned to the sheriff, who simply shook his head, unwilling to force the confrontation. Defeated, Croft jabbed a finger in Silas's direction. "This isn't over. You'll be hearing from us." He spun on his heel and stomped away, the sheriff trailing reluctantly behind him. The silence that descended in their wake was profound. The world seemed to shrink to the space between the 3 of them on the platform. Alara was trembling, the adrenaline and terror leaving her weak. Silas turned to face her. The hardness in his eyes softened as he looked down at Thomas, who was stirring weakly in her arms. His large, calloused hand came up, not to touch her, but to gently brush a stray strand of hair from her son's feverish brow. The gesture was so tender, so unexpected, it made her breath catch. He met her gaze, and for the first time, she saw past the stoic exterior to the man beneath. She saw the deep lines of a difficult life, but also a bedrock of decency that ran deeper than she could have imagined. He had not saved her out of pity. He had saved her because he had recognized a piece of his own solitude, his own struggle, in hers. He had seen her not as a problem to be solved, but as a person to be defended. He looked from her son back to her, his expression serious, his voice low and steady, holding the weight of a solemn promise. "The waiting is over," he said, the words a balm on her raw and frayed spirit. "I am home for you." It was not a declaration of love, not a romantic overture. It was something far more essential. It was a statement of sanctuary, of an end to her desperate isolation. It was an offer of a place to stand, a place to heal, a place to begin again. He bent down and gently, effortlessly, lifted her trunk onto one shoulder. With his other hand, he gestured toward the small, simple house attached to the station office, its windows dark against the afternoon light. "Come," he said. "The boy needs to be out of this sun," she nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. With Thomas held securely in her arms, she followed him. She walked off the platform that had been her prison and stepped onto the solid ground of an uncertain, yet hopeful future. The door to his home opened into a sparse, clean room, smelling of wood smoke and coffee. It was cool and dim, a haven from the relentless glare outside. He led her to a simple cot in the corner and watched as she laid Thomas down. He returned with a basin of cool water and a clean rag, setting them beside her without a word. As she began to bathe her son's face, she felt the last of the tension drain from her body, replaced by an exhaustion so profound it was almost peaceful. She had endured. They had survived. Outside, the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold. The evening train would not be bringing the family she had expected, but in the quiet kindness of a silent stranger, in the unyielding strength of his simple vow, she had found something she hadn't even known she was searching for. She had found a home,